Welcome to Living Outside the Matrix, the show where we examine important issues either ignored or misrepresented in the mainstream narrative. My name is Nigel Howitt, and on the show today, we're going to examine the climate emergency. We're going to look at the whole of the mainstream narrative and some of its implications, put it in a wider context, and ask a load of questions about it, see where perhaps it's leading. And joining me to do this, it's a very great pleasure to be joined today by David Mauriello, Diamond of the Oppenheimer Ranch Project and Magnetic Reversal News. Diamond, thanks so much for taking the time to join me. Welcome to the conversation.
Pleasure to be here on the show, Nigel, and let's get at it because I think that the climate emergency is the next big topic that the mainstream media is going to be pushing for several years.
Yeah, I think you're right. So the first thing I wanted to kind of remind people, just to set our stall out, if you like, is that this idea, this mainstream idea that we've all been sold, most people, a vast majority have bought into, is that CO2 is the problem. There's going to be a climate catastrophe unless we all stop living, stop using energy, which is absolutely crucial to our civilization. So it's a great big disaster scenario. And CO2 is the villain. Would you say that's a fair synopsis, Tom?
That is 100% what they're selling. And the fact that CO2 is not a pollutant, it is plant food, and it is integral for life on Earth, makes it as ludicrous as it could be. And at this point in time, so this whole process of brainwashing the masses on carbon dioxide began back in the 1970s when the Club of Rome decided on a topic to steer the masses. So the Club of Rome, which is similar to the COP groups or any of these globalist groups, all the way back in the 1970s, got some funding together to push a narrative on how can we control the people, and they decided to use climate. And that's where the whole CO2 narrative came. Once that was set in place, it changed the dynamics of funding at universities. And I saw it myself with my own eyes in the 1980s and the 1990s when I was at university. Unless you added climate change or carbon dioxide to your funding papers, you were not getting any money. And that's what then drove this peer-reviewed science of climate science. Prior to the 90s, there was no such thing as climate science. It's a new science created by globalists based on the false narrative that carbon dioxide somehow is a climate control knob. And if we just were to reduce it a little bit, we're all going to live a happy life, which is completely ludicrous because right now no one is happy. And so just by making it warmer outside, how would anyone get happy? I mean, the whole concept is a psyop.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important, isn't it, for us to just dwell for a moment on the usefulness of the idea for means of political control. I don't think that can be overstressed, along with other things like alleged pandemics, of course. Using the justification, which is firmly entrenched in people's mind, doing things for the greater good. Look, we're trying to help you, everybody. This is an emergency. It's for everybody. Like in the alleged pandemic, where people were almost being implicitly made to feel guilty unless they joined in with the experimental treatment. But yeah, it's important to recognize this potential, I think, for political control using the climate issue.
The way that they pull this off is through fear. So the fear has been slowly ramping up for years. And so regular people that are in the rat race, that have to go to their job and they have families, have very little time, like you and I, to saturate ourselves into doing the research and to actually figuring out what's going on here. That in the background, the majority of the population has slowly been ramping up on this fear. They use the pandemic fear. They used social distancing and masks as fear, and the fear builds and builds. It's so pervasive that when I go out into my town, which is in the middle of nowhere, in the most rural area in the United States, I see more and more people driving in cars with masks, alone, going to the shop with these, like, they're toxic, like 10-cent China masks that don't do anything for anyone except make you look like a sheep. And yet they think that when they put this on, somehow their fear level comes down. So the problem is that the fear they're selling, and it's because I think a lot that our society is being pushed away from purpose-driven lives, the spiritual life, having a purpose in life. So when you wake up in the morning, you're full of potential and joy to be alive. People wake up today miserable, scared, and like they're hiding in their cave. And then they put that little mask on. It's
Yeah.
a very sad world we live in.
Yeah, that is a shame, isn't it? And as you said, fear is very much played on. And I mean, how does that leave you then, Diamond? When you meet a newbie or somebody, if you were trying to present the argument to, get somebody to question their belief in the mainstream climate disaster narrative, where would you start? Because it has been said that it's difficult to reason people out of, ideas and beliefs that they hold that they've emoted themselves into through fear. But all that aside for one moment, what do you think is the best starting point?
Well, I can tell you from experience how it can be successful. And so initially, look, I come from a background of drug and alcohol rehabilitation. I've been in recovery for a long time, and I've worked with people that suffer from addictions. And the same thing is occurring there. You need to deprogram yourself from all the brainwashing in order to move forward. This is a process. So just like you can't find someone that's suffering from an addiction and say, I can help you do these things, unless they are willing to help themselves, they're not going to change their mindset. So to shove it down their throat, like on Twitter or social media, that do you go and you attack these climate change people and say you're wrong, it's propaganda. All you're going to do is bolster their position harder. They're going to become more belligerent and listen less. So what I've seen through the work I've been doing for almost a decade now on my channels is, if I just provide the information every day on what's happening in the world, the weather, and then I sprinkle it with a little bit of science that they may hear. If I do this every day, what I've seen happen now, and it's happening every day. I get emails from people say, I've been following you for 3 years now. I started following you because I hated you, and I thought everything you said was a lie. And now my eyes have opened, and I check the papers, I check the peer-reviewed literature, and I can't believe how stupid I was, how I believe what they were saying, and they're still saying it. This is what these people can't believe. Not only have they broken out of the matrix and they saw the light, but they also see now, once you break out of that box, what you see is this pervasive propaganda in everything. And they thank me for that. So until people are ready to listen themselves, and it takes time, it's a process. Like, I was a global warmist in the 1990s because I had been fed the propaganda, and I said, okay, yeah, it's probably happening.
Yeah. Well, one of the key, requirements of being a researcher, thinker, truth seeker is being prepared to be wrong, isn't it? And just saying, well, hey, let's find out. But yeah, so fear is used a lot. So when you've got somebody who wants to know, they're saying, okay, give me your best shot. I mean, I don't know about you. Maybe you can comment on this. But for me, some of the obvious facts from undisputed data sources and graphs and so forth that show that it's clearly been warmer than it is now in the past, and there has very much been greater concentrations of atmospheric CO2 in the past, much greater than now. Both of those are facts, and yet we're still here. You could go on, couldn't you? You mentioned CO2 being plant food, absolutely crucial for the ongoing survival of all life on the planet.
Yeah. So just in general, Nigel, and when you say in the past, this is the very recent past, the Holocene. In the last 10,000 years, it's only recently that we have ice in the poles. For most of the last 10,000 years, there was no ice on Earth. That's how warm it was. And sea level was over 100 feet higher because there was no ice. There's no ice in the North Pole whatsoever, very little ice on Greenland. This is why people like the Vikings flourished on Greenland. And then once that ice began to build recently, it pushed out, the Vikings perished. They were living in an icy hellhole. So these are things that people need to grasp. The mainstream is not telling you it was a few degrees C warmer 5,000 years ago, because they're telling you that if the temperature rises by 2 C, the whole world ends, which is ludicrous. Because if we just go back a little bit before that, let's go back 12,000, 13,000, just 14,000 years ago. If we go back 16,000 years ago, the temperature on Earth is 15 degrees C cooler than now.
Really?
15 degrees. And the IPCC, the UN, Klaus Schwab, and all these globalist frauds want to scare you to death because the temperature will rise 2 degrees C by the end of the century. Well, that's great. Everyone will go to the beach. I mean, how ludicrous is this idea?
Yeah, I've always been amused at how, they've turned things getting a little warmer into bad news because, where I live here in England, and it's pretty miserable and cold here at the moment. We
And
could do with a bit warmer.
Nigel, statistically, this is what the main, everyone, you need to be a critical thinker. If you simply do some research on what kills more people, the heat or the cold, you're going to find that 10, in some cases, 50 times more people die from the cold than the heat. And this has been happening forever. And yet they've got this false narrative that if it warms up a few degrees, we're going to suffer. Completely ludicrous. And the fact that CO2 rising is a danger is another falsehood. Geologically speaking, Nigel, we are at the lowest carbon dioxide concentration on planet Earth. Back in times like the Carboniferous or the Triassic and Jurassic, when dinosaurs and there were jungles everywhere, carbon dioxide was at levels, ridiculous levels, 3,000 parts per million. We're at around 400 and they're worried. Completely insane, because at 3,000 parts per million, the Earth was filled with biodiversity unseen. And so another thing that goes against the narrative is that never a straight answer. NASA itself published a paper 3 years ago. They had been studying the greening of Earth. And as CO2 has been rising, the Earth has been getting greener. So the only true side effects of this fake narrative of CO2 rising is it gets a little warmer, according to them, which doesn't kill people. Cold kills people. And there's more CO2, which means the Earth gets greener and we have more plants. And you know what plants do to the planet? They don't make it warmer. They make it cooler. Have you ever stood under a tree in the shade? It's cooler under plants. So plants not only retain moisture in the soil, they protect biodiversity. They help communities of animals survive and thrive. Everything they're telling you is the opposite of the true narrative of what's going on scientifically.
Yeah, it is. It's staggering, isn't it, as to how important plant life is to us on this planet, and that is fueled by lots of CO2. But it's
And
incredible.
in this whole time, this is a great psyop. In the last decade, especially as the CO2 fraud ramps up, they have stopped talking about PCBs and phthalates and all the toxins that are in our food, air, and water that are actually toxins.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because the globalist model wants to keep you a slave. They want you sick, pasty, slightly diseased, going to the doctor. They want to keep you unmotivated. They don't want you to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. They don't want you to go to bed early, wake up early. They don't want you to grow your own food. They don't want you to be educated on what actual science is. The mainstream has been claiming for 10 years that the science is settled. By definition, that's not science. There's no such thing as settled science. Science is a process that moves forward. It doesn't go backward. You come up with new ideas, and you come up with a new hypothesis, and you keep moving forward to better your theory. That's not what's happening here. They said, this is what's happening. You better comply and comply and comply.
Yeah.
And so this is nothing more than a control narrative, in my opinion.
I think it's evidence that we're in the sort of post-truth world. You could say from a propagandist perspective, you could argue that anything goes now because the vast majority of people are so in the matrix. When you look at the number of people who are, concerned about the alleged pandemic, and you look at the numbers of people, the percentages of people that buy into the climate emergency narrative, you can see that we are extremely close to, if you were spinning the narrative yourself, you'd say, well, I think we can get away with anything now, guys, don't you?
Well, they proved it to themselves I mean, at the beginning of this pandemic, they were every single top person. If it wasn't the pharmaceutical industry or the World Health Organization or Fauci himself, everything that they said turned out to be untrue. And yet, right now, the majority of the sheep out there that got the jab, they think that it prevents disease. They think that it keeps them out of the hospital, when all the while the papers coming out now are showing that vaccinated people are more likely to be hospitalized. Yeah. Vaccinated people are dropping dead everywhere at young ages, at age, vaccinated people have excess deaths. Vaccinated people have myocarditis. Vaccinated people have Bell's palsy. Vaccinated people have this, that, and the other. I don't know unvaccinated people that are surrounding me are sick. No unvaccinated people have even, that I know of, have even gotten COVID, because we're not dumb enough to go get a COVID test when we're sick. When we're sick, we stay home, we eat good food, we rest, and then we recover. So if you're sick and you go to a hospital, odds are you'll get sicker, because what's in a hospital? Sick people. So, I mean, and I believe, I just found something yesterday that I shared with, on a podcast with my group at CIA.gov. You can click on resources and have access to the Freedom of Information Act, that things they've revealed that used to be classified. In there, there's a declassified document from 1983 called the Gateway Process. Have you ever heard of this?
No, I haven't, no.
It is the CIA doing experiments on using your mind to heal your body. And they proved that it worked. And they needed that information hidden because it would have destroyed the pharmaceutical industry and literally bankrupt the world. So it is a matter of national security not to allow humanity to understand that they have the ability to heal themselves in their mind. Yeah. That is the disgusting world we live on. The money funders and these governments that are claiming to be doing the right thing for you is the exact opposite. And we need each and every one of you listening to this podcast to either wake up or to share this with someone that is right on the cusp, because it is only the moment when all of humanity realizes that they have been lied to, that we can rise up and end this cabal, whatever it is. Like it's not just one group, it's a bunch of groups that are working in orchestra. And, you know, there's not one evil guy pushing the button like the Wizard of Oz. It's all of these greedy, self-centered ego. I mean, they're egocentric. I think they might be soulless. I think that might be a thing, because in the only reason that people like you and I'm not speaking for you, but what I say probably you'll agree with, because the only reason that we get along, Nigel, is we have a purpose-driven life. I bet you are a spiritual person. I'm not saying you go to church, because I don't go to church, but I know that there is a higher good and a higher cause, and I'm not it.
Yeah, well, I think that having a purpose is really important. I think that getting up in the morning and, you know, being on a mission is a really important thing in life. And of course, you can't just get up in the morning and decide on a whim what your mission will be. It's something that you need to zoom out and do a lot of thinking about in order to come up with. So, you know, for example, your ranch project, Diamond, you know, it didn't just happen. You made it happen, you and your partner, Leah, of course. But so my point is that it takes a bit of thinking, and we have to sort of zoom out and think, well, what do I want to do with my life? What's the context here? How dangerous is the world? How independent do I need to be? Do I need a well? Do I need to be able to grow food? I need to know how to be healthy. That's pretty important. So these are all the things I think people need to think about in an overall life plan sort of way. And this isn't geeky to do. It's essential in the current context, and it can really help, you know, create a central purpose sort of thing, you know, like you were talking about, Diamond. It's particularly with your project.
Now, I had some mentors to get me jump started, because I didn't know. I was brainwashed. You know, I was in school for 20 straight years being programmed. Even at university, through graduate school, I'm being programmed in there. And it was only when I broke through the matrix and I was able to sit quietly for up to almost 2 years, Nigel. I wasn't asking any questions. I was trying to shut off the noise in my head. Through the process of meditating and sitting quietly, and just asking the universe to tell me what my purpose is. I wasn't going to seek it out. I was just sitting in silence, and then a lightning bolt hit me. And they said, your purpose is to help other people achieve what you've just done. You've broken free. And that was the moment where I was like, okay. My mentor then told me, he said, do you know you can manifest your universe? And I was like, what are you talking about? He said, the more you think about now your purpose and what you want, what it does is it attracts people to you that allow you to manifest your purpose. And so for the next few years, I said, I want to be a permaculture farmer. I want to live in the wilderness. I want to teach people how to do this. And I just said that to myself every day. And 3 years later, I'm in Colorado and I'm building this ranch. I didn't do it. The universe allowed me to do it. And it was until that I realized that. And this is what the gateway process is. This paper that I found from the CIA, not only does it say you can use your mind to heal your body, but it says you can use your mind to achieve any goal in the future if you just think about it. If you want to be a doctor and you think 24 hours a day, I'm going to be the best doctor in the world, in a few years, you will be. There is no way you could not. It's explained in the gateway process. And it's a way of rewiring your brain from being scared, sick, and brainwashed to having complete freedom and control over everything you do. And I think everyone can achieve this. I'm not special. I was once homeless. I was incarcerated. I used to be a very horrible person. And that was because this society made me that way. But you do not have to be your former self. And you don't have to regret who you were. That's what holds people back. Just because you said something mean to someone, that doesn't mean you can't apologize now and make yourself feel well.
Yeah.
So you can undo the wrongs of your past, and you can be a better person every day moving forward. And you can manifest your destiny with your mind. You don't need money. You don't need fame. I had nothing. I was living in a crack house in the poorest town in Norristown, Pennsylvania, barely scraping by. I had nothing. And now I have everything I could ever ask for. You know what? I needed to have breakfast before the show. I went out. I was like, you know what? Let me just go out and get breakfast from the chickens. I got some eggs. I thanked the birds. I came in, I had a few eggs. So, and I had some bacon with that. Not bacon I bought in the store, not bacon from pigs fed poison, from pigs I raised here organically. So I have enough food and meat and eggs and vegetables. I have 2 rigid greenhouses that operate year long. Anyone can be self-sufficient. We all need to work towards this. And
it is a fair bit of work, though, isn't it, Diamond? I mean, you know, these things. I run a small holding as well, and it certainly doesn't all happen by itself.
No.
So there is, you know, a certain amount of, you know, keenness to get up and go in the morning and get your hands dirty is really useful, isn't it?
Well, when you live a purpose-driven life like you and I,
exactly,
I wake up at 7 a.m. and I go to sleep near midnight, and I work the whole time. You know, it's like a 16-hour day.
Yeah.
I'm not working for someone else. I'm not working for a company that I don't really like. I'm not doing some tasks so someone else can make money. Everything I do is for me and Leah and the ranch and our animals.
Yeah.
And that kind of purpose drives you. I don't ever, even if I'm tired, I don't feel exhausted. I sleep better. So that's the kind of positive thinking that you can work through.
Yeah.
But just like you said, if you run a farm, I just lost my farm manager of 3 years. He moved back to his original town. And so all that was dumped on me. And at first I was overwhelmed, but I was like, you know what? I have to do this. This is what I do to live. And so I quickly got over that nonsense. And now I actually enjoy the fact I was missing out on doing every aspect of the farm. I mean, like, I enjoy it now. So I'm not missing out on anything.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, no, it's you know, the mind certainly, I think, is, you know, the manager of our lives. And if we repeat things, and I've used affirmations in the past and things, it can be really good to drive yourself into the right mindset where you're thinking, living, breathing your dream. You know, you're everything about it. And I think it helps. For me, it's helped inform my actions at every stage. You know, to sort of usher me along the path that I've been trying to create for myself. Because I agree, Diamond. We know I think we are responsible for creating our own world in some respects. The stuff around us, we can steer things in a general direction. We can think, we put ideas into action. There's a lot we can do, and it does so fill you with purpose, isn't it? I can certainly see, from the example that you do there. Another thing I wanted to get into is those permaculture principles, because you've got them out on your website there, on the Oppenheimer Ranch website, and I love those really sensible, grounding principles that seem to come from some brilliant common sense somewhere, and you kind of go, yes, live by that.
Well,
And
yeah.
when you
So when they posited these back in the 70s, the people that first saw them were like, "Oh my God, this is how the world is going to go. This is the most logical, sensible thing." Like, because you think about it, back then when they came out in the 70s, we have landfills and PCBs and rivers on fire. If we just used these sensible tools, we wouldn't pollute anymore. We would be great stewards of the earth. We would be
yeah,
protecting animals and biomes, and everyone just forgot about it. The reason is because the general person, you and me, we're not in control of the narrative. It's the money funders, it's the advertisers, it's the television and the programming that you're watching. Everyone is brainwashed. Everything is filled with propaganda, and people just forget that they're destroying the earth. They forget that they're throwing out all this toxic plastic that's going to come and make them infertile. That's going to come and make them sick and give them cancer. We forget, and it's unfortunate because the whole world is being lied to. I don't, you said earlier, you're talking about propaganda. Are you aware of the Smith Modernization Act of 2012?
no,
In 2012, they passed a law in the United States that allowed for our government to use propaganda on all of the mainstream airwaves. So since 2012, 100% of everything you hear from the mainstream media is controlled by the CIA and the government. None of it's true. It is a narrative to get to an end game. And what we've seen the end game is total control of the population. And at some point, because there's so many people on this earth, the population is going to be pushed to its limit, and we will not have it anymore. This is what they want. They want global unrest. They don't want 8 billion useless eaters. That's what they call us. They want a 500 million left on earth as slaves to do their bidding. And you can read the book. It's Klaus Schwab's The Great COVID-19, The Great Reset. You can buy the book on Amazon. It says it directly in the pages. By proxy wars, by stupid lockdowns and laws and rules, they are going to break down society, make you sicker, and we are all going to slowly wither away and die. And it says it right in the book that the population on Earth is going to be reduced to around 1 billion or 500 million. That's the exact range he gives by 2050. It's disgusting. And people are following him. They're voting for Democrats that promote globalism. This world is, I believe, vaccine injured, in my opinion.
yeah, I think you're right. So, Diamond, what do you, when you look into this whole idea, bringing another topic in here, in the magnetic reversal idea, and using your knowledge of your geological perspective, if you like, how do you see events around that? Do you see any kind of connection? If so, what? And I remember from looking into the Schumann resonance or the Schumann frequency and listening to Greg Braden, some decades ago, I remember being interested in the idea that the poles could slip, there could be. Can you give us some idea, kind of bring that topic in and how it affects what you've already shared with us of your vision of the big picture, if you like?
Well, without spending an hour explaining that there's a rotational pole and there's a geomagnetic pole and they're independent and they're not related. Most people out there are confused with a pole shift, a magnetic reversal. They use all these terms and none of them are related. So what's happening now is there is what we know scientifically, what you can say with 100% confidence is that the magnetic field of Earth has been weakening for over 100 years. And in the last few decades, it's exponentially weakening. So every 10 years, it weakens 10 or 20 times faster. And what else is happening is that the magnetic poles are moving rapidly. They started moving around 1860 after the Carrington event, and they've been accelerating since then. And in the last 2 decades, they've been accelerating very rapidly. The North Pole is now moving over about 100 miles a year or more. And it was only moving 5 miles a year 5 decades ago. So the North Pole is rapidly moving. It just passed the rotational pole. The South Pole is off of Antarctica and headed towards Indonesia. And both poles will meet in Indonesia if you do the statistical analysis. Guess when? 2050, the exact time the Great Reset occurs. So there is a direct parallel to what is geophysically happening on Earth and what these globalists are planning. They know what's happening, and they want it to meet at the same time when humanity is weakest, when the global unrest is complete and the weather systems are going haywire. There will be a very small population. It will be very easy to make that a slave society. So they know what's happening, and we're warning people because before the bottom of the event, lots of things are going to roll out here. We're going to have grid down scenarios. The powers that be and the globalists may be using it as proxy wars. They may set off EMP weapons. At the same time, a solar flare may come in and shut down portions of the grid. They may blow up the rest of the grid.
Right.
And then all the dumb sheep are going to be like, climate change. Because everything's climate change, right? Vaccine injury is climate change. Everything is climate change.
Yeah, it's interesting that this thing about solar flares, and you mentioned the Carrington event there, which I believe was a big mama of a solar flare. It's interesting,
Not
isn't it?
actually, it's the biggest in the last 200 years that we have recorded, but it pales in comparison to recent scientific findings over the last decade that there have been 5 super flares in the last 9,000 years. These flares are 100 to 1,000 times bigger than the Carrington event. So the Carrington type events happen all the time, and that will be coming to a future near you.
Yeah, so I mean, that sort of event is going to have massive implications. It did for power grids, back in the 1800s or wherever the event last happened. But imagine that on a the internet world of today. I mean, that's going to have a catastrophic.
It ends the empire in an instant. There's no more shipping and receiving. There's no more manufacturing. There's no more anything.
That would be an off button for the global economy, wouldn't it? Almost, if a solar flare well directed. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it would end the empire. The world, we would be in a Mad Max world in 72 hours because the general public would be informed within 3 days that the power is never coming back on. Then everything gets looted. Then everyone picks up arms and everyone hides in their cave. And that's how the beginning rolls out. And then the decades after that is the Mad Max world where we have roving gangs trying to get things moving around the surface.
Do you think it'll go in that sort of direction, David? Do you a lot of people are optimistic with more and more people doing some thinking, more and more people questioning assumptions and hearing new ideas. Do you think that that's happening at sufficient a rate to forestall anything catastrophic?
There is nothing we can do to prevent that scenario. Even if we harden the grid to the greatest ability we have, if we stockpile transformers underground to replace all of them if they do fry, the amount of destruction with a large solar flare that would enter the current of our planet would be so pervasive that everything would be affected. So if the event was slightly weaker than a Carrington event, maybe half of the Earth would come out unfried. And so with half of the Earth being in the dark for 1 to 10 years, and the other half being with some electricity left, whoever has the electric is the new world power. I mean, whoever is left wins. And so they would come and subjugate and take everything from the grid down areas. It would be so easy. No one would know you were coming. You just take your infrastructure, go there and take everything. Yeah. So that's the worst case scenario, that the event isn't severe enough that a section of the Earth survives. Now, the powers that be know this is coming, and they have misappropriated trillions of dollars, have gone missing. And this is probably for deep underground military bases, which are being installed in countries all over the world that can afford them. The powers that be are completely ready to go underground and to be self-sufficient for decades while the mayhem happens up on the surface. So there are certain factions that will be just fine underground, and we may or may not know about them. But
Yeah.
I want them, if they're listening, to know that if the event happens, I am going to build an army and we are coming to find you.
There you go. Now they know if they're listening. But yeah, it does present an alarming scenario, but of course it might not happen. So I mean, I think it's important to
Right.
live a way
So
of
if the sun
life. Go
if the
on.
sun doesn't save us, then where are we in 10 years with this globalist agenda? I mean, at some point, I think the population is going to say, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you see it?
Well, it doesn't look good from my perspective, if I'm honest. I mean, I look around and I see so many people don't think their own thoughts. So many people are quite happy to regurgitate the ideas that are sown in their minds. That I don't. When I look around and sort of as sort of my a cultural barometer around me, I'm not optimistic. That there's a lot of irrational behaviour in interpersonal stuff, and people just seem stupid on many levels. Not just people wearing a mask in a car. Still,
Well, have you
um,
heard, you've heard of the full moon effect?
yes. Yeah, go on, elucidate.
So when the moon is full, there's statistical analysis that shows that some people go crazy, that there are more accidents occur on full moons, more murders, more robberies. And the full moon effect is due to the interaction of, well, you know that tides go up and down. Well, so do emotions in human bodies. What makes it more devastating is that there's something called the cosmic ray effect. So the sun affects human health. And there are lots of peer-reviewed papers that have come out over the last decade proving that when the sun flares and geomagnetic storms happen on Earth, that many people suffer myocardial infarction, stroke, or cerebral hemorrhage. And in fact, people that are in our community, specifically those that are involved with like earthquakes or grand solar minimum or electric universe, two of the most famous people had strokes during a KP9 event several years ago. So not only are there papers, but I know people who have had strokes during geomagnetic storms. So that's one effect. During geomagnetic storms, there's human health effects. But the
Makes
opposite
sense.
of geomagnetic storm is KP0. And that happens when the magnetosphere weakens. The sun isn't doing anything and everything's quiet. The magnetic field like reduces to nothing. When that occurs, cosmic rays rain down on Earth. Now, cosmic rays have opposite effects of increased solar activity. So when the KP goes to zero, the cosmic ray effect affects people with unstable brains. So you start to get all these psychological effects. So as the decades progress, more and more people that are psychologically weak will literally become unwound. I think this is the exact description of the zombie apocalypse. If enough of the population is negatively affected by cosmic rays, they'll just lose their mind. They'll become cannibals or just maniacs and rob everyone. So
I
the
mean,
future doesn't look very bright, even if the grid doesn't go down.
no, this is true. So, I mean, unfortunately, I think such people, haven't really got their shit together. So, although the idea of them going around as crazed maniacs is quite frightening, I think they wouldn't probably survive that long. So they wouldn't be survive long enough to pose a threat to me, and I would have a survival plan. So I think I'll outlive them. But anyway, the idea of the pole shift again. So solar flares is a possibility, and I think it's worth designing a lifestyle that at least acknowledges a certain possibility that could take out all electrical systems. So it seems to me to a certain degree of off-gridness and long-term thinking to do with resilience in such an extreme occurrence is something that's worth having a vague plan for in the back of our minds, although it's obviously not a pressing one. But what about the coming back to this pole movement? Do you rule out the idea of a pole shift that could give you a serious sort of disorientation of where east and west was, relatively speaking, if continental plates or the Earth's crust actually slipped, as it were? How likelihood is any of that? Do you think there's any credibility to these suggestions, which I remember seeing on the internet about 15 years ago? So
yeah, there is credibility to the suggestion, but what I've done is I've I dove into all the literature recently, and I'm doing a series of podcasts on that to literally quelch the fear of pole flip or shift. And I was going to correct you because you kept saying pole shift, but you're actually talking about the pole shift. So what's actually occurring now is a magnetic excursion, not a magnetic reversal. The last magnetic reversal was almost 1,000,000 years ago. But quite frequently, since then, every few thousand years, the magnetic field varies rapidly. So we're in a magnetic excursion, which has nothing to do with the rotational pole. So the fact that the magnetic field is moving around does not affect the rotational pole. So it's not going to cause the Earth to flip. Okay. Now, a lot of people think the crust slips or the pole may shift because in the Bible it says the sun rose over there and blah, blah, blah. Well, and the only way to do that is to change the rotation of the Earth. The only problem with that is if you were to stop the Earth, we would all die. If you were to change it and rotate it the other way, we would all be dead. The Earth is spinning at a ridiculous speed. So if you were to stop the Earth, like the oceans would continue to move and slosh around. There's very little geologic evidence of any of this happening. And all I did was focus on the Arctic. In the last decade, there have been a lot of flash frozen mammoths found in the Arctic. Well, they've been found and dated pretty specifically. Now, a lot of people say dating is all wrong. That's not true. So they've dated hundreds of these animals, and they date from 20 to 45,000 years old, which means that the Arctic has been frozen continuously for 50,000 years. So there has been no crustal slip or pole shift for 50,000 years because the animals that got frozen in the Arctic are perfectly still frozen. And now when we're washing them out of the dirt, we're finding them. They haven't decomposed. Because they haven't decomposed at all means they've been frozen the entire time. And they keep dating more and more of them, and they're all between 20 and 50,000 years old. So that means that the Earth has been pretty stable for 50,000 years at least. And if there ever was a crustal slip or pole flip, it's very long ago and probably didn't affect humanity.
Right. Is there any talk in the mainstream narrative about these things, or is the idea of sorry, just a quick tangent here. You mentioned that we're going through a magnetic excursion, and the magnetic field is collapsing. Is that likely to is that estimated to result in a flip, or will that simply bounce back up at some point, and it'll be a what do you see happening there?
Excellent question. Well, 99% of the time, the field weakens to almost or around zero. The magnetic poles converge on the equator, and then other magnetic poles pop up. When you get a very low field strength, you'll get the two poles migrate towards the equator, and then other poles will appear. You could have 4, 6, 8 poles. So navigation goes out of the window. But what also is happening at these low field strengths is that the Earth is open up to galactic radiation. We have a very rapid increase in UVA, UVB, and UVC. Everyone that's alive that's our age knows the sun has changed color since they were a child. It used to be yellow, and now it is white. Can you confirm that?
It seems to fit with my experience, but I'm not sure if I'm honest, but I can go with that.
As the field weakens, the sun will be brighter and brighter, and you will get burned faster and faster if you're out in the sun. At some point, it will be so bad that if you go out into the sun for just an hour, you'll die of skin cancer in an hour. And we have paleontological evidence that at 41,500 years ago, during the most extreme magnetic excursion in recent history, it's called the Lachamp excursion at 41,500 years ago. This is still when the North Pole is up north because all the mammoths are frozen. But we had another hominid on Earth that we were competing with called Neanderthal at the time. So we've got the two main apex predators are Neanderthal and Homo sapien as far as hominids. Neanderthals died during this magnetic excursion. They went extinct at the lowest field strength. So maybe the Neanderthals were not smart enough to go into caves and know that they needed to stay in caves or they would be consumed by the sun, and they needed to go hunt at night. So during these excursions, you can't go outside during the day, and things start to change. Now, as a paleontologist, I can tell you there's no such thing as evolution in the rock record. We have species, and this is for all of geologic time. We have a species, it stays in what we call stasis. It doesn't change for long periods of time, but it goes extinct. And then right on the other side of the boundary is a new species. And these extinction boundaries occur when the field strength dips. So it's the cosmic radiation that comes into the Earth. It mutates the biology on the surface. And then after the event, we have all these new things. And the things that couldn't make it are all dead.
Wow. That's good.
So that's what we have to worry about. Increased cosmic rays, increased UVA and UVB, difficulty of growing food, difficulty of going outside at the peak of the event. And this is why modern anthropology claims that just a few thousand years ago, we were all cavemen, right? Prior to 10,000 years ago, we were all hunter-gatherer cavemen. No, that's because around every 10, 12,000 years, the field strength reduces. And if we are not cavemen, we are not here.
Yeah, gosh, that's sobering thoughts. Eh? Yeah,
I mean,
gosh,
you can make it, you can survive if you know all the things I said.
Yeah.
You don't go out. If you go outside in the sun and your skin starts bubbling, you probably should not go out in the sun anymore, right? You got to change your tactic.
So you're saying that this is ties in potentially with this collapsing magnetic field, and best prognosis around about 2050, and you think that it's known about. Is it?
Yeah,
Can you draw a line on a graph, sort of mapping out the collapse, and sort of see? Okay, it's gonna. Is it like that, or can you accurately predict?
Yeah, if you use well, here's the funny thing, Nigel. So if they knew about it, wouldn't they be hiding the information from us?
Well, I was going to go on to ask you what the raw data, the information, is it difficult to get at? Is it being hidden?
It's impossible to get. If you start to search on the internet, the World Magnetic Model, this is what they use, the WMM. They update it, they were updating it once every 5 years. Now, like I said, in the last decade, the reduction has increased exponentially, and the speed of the pole has increased to hundreds of miles a year. So last update was in 2020. A year before that, the pole had moved so fast, they had to update it for the first time ever in 4 years because the runways didn't line up. Global navigation was off by hundreds of miles, and people were missing the mark because they weren't told that the North Pole had moved. So they were still using the same charts, but the North Pole's now 500 miles away from where it was 5 years ago. And they updated it early. Then they updated it in 2019. Then they updated it again in 2020. And then they announced that there will be no more updates.
Right. Okay. Moving around too fast for them to map, perhaps.
Or if they were to tell everyone that this is what's happening, people would panic. If you knew that you needed to prepare for the rest of your life instead of going to work, you would quit your job, start to learn to be self-sufficient, learn how to grow food, start building a greenhouse out of scrap wood, anything to prepare. And if they warn you, the whole world would start preparing for the event and stop playing along with their game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that that sort of preparation again is what you and I are engaged in already, isn't it? And that's the wonderful thing, this purposeful
yeah. Let me ask you,
existence.
Nigel, if a solar flare just happened right now and tomorrow we're back in the Stone Age, would you run out to the store or would you pray a little and just say, I'm ready, and then start to change what you're doing?
Yeah, we'd probably just hunker down, as you could say. We've got all our basic preparations in order. Obviously, losing electricity would be problematic, but we have a big generator and a lot of stored fuel. We've got means of burning solid fuels to stay warm. Yeah. It would be very difficult, no doubt, very, very difficult, but I'm confident that we could survive.
The difficulty would be in the transition in the beginning. Within a year, you would have developed a new system. Yeah. You'd be wild harvesting stuff that you never thought about, collecting the dandelions, who knows? But after the difficult transition, it would be wonderful. you wouldn't, there would be no more news or any of the garbage you have to listen to instilling fear in you. The only thing you would be worried about is crazy people coming to get your stuff.
Indeed, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
The children would be off all the computer games, of course. That would all go quiet. That
And
would
think
cause a bit
about
of
how
stress.
well adjusted all of humanity would be. They'd be learning from nature. It would be a wonderful reset. This is the great reset I think that we need as humans. And the people pushing the fake great reset know what's coming and they want to have control of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it could go either way at the moment, couldn't it? Really, I think, Diamond, and you know, this whole climate change narrative, I do see as key, and with it, you know, the political usefulness of the pandemic narrative that we hinted on earlier on. I think these two, you know, we could see these two being used either together. They certainly have they overlap nicely in terms of their requirements for us all to give up freedoms and be told to live less, move around less, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think it could go kind of either way, but I'm a little bit concerned, as you hinted at earlier, that the climate card could be rolled out again, could be brought to the forefront. We've already had something in the news here, and although you know didn't hit the big time news, but if you dug enough, you could find it. A local council in Oxfordshire
Yeah,
announcing a policy for climate lockdown and stuff like this. You know, this is it smells like it's coming, doesn't it?
well, Leah and I were talking about this at dinner last night. She brought it up, and I said, "Yeah, I heard about it yesterday. That you're going to have so in Gloucester. How do you say it? Gloucestershire?
Yeah, Gloucestershire. Yeah,
Yeah. So what they determined that they're going to lock everyone down in those areas. Going to get 100 passes a year to go out of your zone. Let's say if you needed to. I mean, it's complete lunacy. It's literally prison planet.
yeah,
And people are nodding like, "Oh yeah, it's to save the earth." But
yeah,
like, "Oh my God, get a clue."
yeah.
It's to keep you in compliance. It's not to save anyone.
Yeah, it's a real forehead slapper, isn't it, for
Now,
those
here's
people
the
that are,
stupidity that's being driven. We're rapidly shifting to this green energy. The green energy technology that we have right now is so inefficient, it won't run the earth. Not only that, is if as we're rolling it out, there is more destruction that happens to the earth to roll out this technology. To put up a single wind turbine, it burns more oil and gas than the oil and gas we would burn to create the energy. So it's a completely antithetical to science. None of it is true. And the green movement is destroying the planet. No one wants to bring that up. No one is highlighting that. And we're just barreling towards the destruction of the earth. It's complete lunacy.
yeah. I mean, what is it they need for the batteries? All the binding, is it cobalt and boron? I don't know.
Cobalt,
There's
lithium.
lithium. Yeah, I mean, the whole mining thing, it's not very thought out by fans of electric cars who sort of champion their consumer purchase as being, you know, striking a blow for the environment. But,
An
you know, are
electric
they
car
deluding
is a
themselves?
$70,000 scam. It only is worth $30,000 until the battery runs out.
Yeah,
So you can buy the same $10,000 car, put 10,000 in gas and go further than the $70,000 battery vehicle. Now, when the electric car is dead, you can't replace the battery. It costs as much as a new car. You throw it into a trash pile. So if we have 1 billion people throwing out cars every 4 years, I mean, this is just lunacy.
yeah. It adds up to less cars, really, doesn't it? Because of what you're saying, they just can't be the number of cars. So it really adds up
No.
to stay at home, you people in Gloucestershire, you know, and only come out when we allow. And if we allow you to plug your electric car in and charge it up, you know, it's as you said
And
a
if you
number of
get
times,
a
it's all about
pass,
political control.
if you get a pass to drive your gas engine or your diesel engine, the fuel is going to be 85 a gallon. So just to go to town costs like $300. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see horseback riding and
Get a
bicycle
horse.
use
I was about to
all
say that.
coming right back.
Yeah. Get a horse.
Nice one, Diamond. Well, look, are there any things that you wanted to specifically talk about? Did you want to plug anything any projects that you've got happening or coming to fruition? Anything you wanted to mention in that respect? Please feel
Well,
free.
just the fact that we're now diving deep into the whole idea of pole flip and trying to debunk that fear out there that our pole has been we've been rotating the same way for a very long time, And so don't be scared of the oceans washing over. What has happened, and you should be fearful of, is cometary impact streams. We have so much historical information and now documented scientific information that large comets hit the Earth quite often, every few thousand years. The last one hasn't happened recently. So there's a very high probability something will hit the ocean. And when these objects hit the ocean, we'll know it's coming in, but they propagate mega tsunamis. So within 6 hours, millions of people will be washed away to their death. And there's no way to prepare for this. There's no escape. So this is something that, if it does occur, would literally create this catastrophe. But because of the amount of destruction that it would in place instantly, it would literally bankrupt the world in an instant. So it's a really strange thought experiment. If you have this mega tsunami that washes up on a continent and drags out 60% of the people, the amount of infrastructure and damage would be so catastrophic that what we're doing on Earth would essentially end.
Shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, gosh. So that's a cheery note to wind it up on. But these things are worth
but it's
going on.
none of it is gloom and doom or fear. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to prepare you. If you're not by an ocean I'm in the middle of a continent because I escaped the fear. I'm now self-sufficient and have backup energy. So I'm not worried if the power goes out. I don't need to go to the store because I have food here that I create. So it's all peace of mind. Building a self-sufficient life allows you to break down all the fear barriers that are being fed to you every day.
Yeah.
I'm not scared of anything. I have enough weaponry here. If a whole army comes, I'll be like, all right, let's do this. So, and I have alarms on all the perimeters of the property. So if I hear a certain alarm, I know where you're coming from. You're coming from the Northeast. Yeah. So, I mean, there is a way to prepare yourself for what may come or may not, and to not be scared, and to have a purpose-driven life, and to be excited about the future, as long as it's not the future of Klaus Schwab.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to be awake to the dangers that are coming, the potential dangers, don't we? And I guess part of being a researcher and a truth seeker is applying that critical thinking to the various ideas, scary things like the climate emergency or an alleged pandemic. And we have to really apply ourselves to that and think, well, is this really something to be scared of? Is it really a justified fear, or is it propaganda? Am I being asked to, does it have political implications? I always think that's an interesting thing to bear in mind. Does it have freedom implications and political implications whenever you hear a scary story? And that can, that should steer people's inquiry, I think, to work out whether threats are real or not.
I think that in the near future, the biggest worry that we should be worried about as humanity is the transhumanist agenda. And the fact that in just a few months, Neuralink is going to go live in a person. This is a very scary development as far as humanity is concerned, in my opinion, that this can be a very dark future that rapidly rolls out in a very short period of time. And that as the fear ramps up in the next few years and this technology is available, they may have commercials that say that if you get the Neuralink, you can be happy every day. We'll program happiness into your brain. You don't even need to have money. We'll make your brain think that you have money, and you'll be happy all day. And everyone, because humanity is so miserable now, everyone is going to opt into this.
That's a really interesting scenario.
Yeah, we already have the eugenics machines like popping up in Canada, right? If you're sick and you're old in Canada, instead of them trying to help you, they say, well, why don't you just kill yourself? I mean, this is going to spread around the world. You'll have the option of killing yourself or linking up to the Neuralink. Yeah. And that is a scary future. I am a pure blood. I will be a pure brained forever until the day I die. I am not hooking up to a machine, and I am certainly not going to put an experimental genetic test into my body.
For sure. I think you and I are on the same page right on that one, man. Yeah, my goodness. I mean, it's that personal sovereignty thing, isn't it? It's just like, no, you're not coming over here.
The only person I knew got the jab is my neighbor. And he's a smart guy. He moved here because I'm here. He moved all the way from wherever he was because he knew I helped start the march against Monsanto, and he followed my activism work. Well, he got the jab because he has a grandmother that's 90 and he wanted to keep her safe. And I'm like, that's not going to keep her safe. After he got it, and he got the worst one, the J&J, which is called the clot shot, which is now off the market. First he got shingles, the optical shingles, and his whole face was crusted with a scab. And then one day he came out of his house. He's like, writhing in pain. He was having a stroke. He got a stent put in. This is a young guy. He's 10 years younger than me. And so just to see that was so scary. I don't wish that on anyone.
No, absolutely. But, we tried to, I certainly tried in my small way to alert people to the facts of reality and to all of the information that they should rightly have been joining together and integrating into the rightful conclusion not to participate in any experimental medical treatments. But unfortunately, lots of people don't listen. They're very plugged in. They think the doctor knows best. And where you go, unfortunately.
Well, 3 years ago, it was so hard to even get the information out. Every time we did a video with doctors or with peer-reviewed literature, it would get immediately shut down, demonetized. I couldn't even publish on YouTube for 3 and 6 months at a time, and they'd block my accounts. And then you go over to an alternative platform and 8 people are watching it because that's what they wanted to happen. And even now, I have thousands of videos up on Oppenheimer Ranch Project. We used to have 7,000 or more podcasts. It's down to 4 because 3,000 of them had to be removed. Many of them were removed by YouTube. None of them have disinformation in it. They were all called disinformation.
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of that, hasn't there? Hey ho, we can only just carry on putting it out there, can't we, Diamond? Just keep bouncing back. Yeah. And you're doing a great job, man. I mean, you're putting an awful lot of stuff out there. You're prolific in the content. You're varied, and I like to keep one eye on all the stuff that you're talking about. It's really fantastic. So and I again really inspired by the whole permacultural thing. With your ranch project there, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, and the reason we picked the area we are is for geophysical safety. And also, when we picked it, I was like, that's the hardest place to grow food in the whole freaking world. Like, we had a better chance up in Alaska. But the point is that if you can grow food here, you can grow food anywhere. And so we are trying to prove that anyone can do it no matter where they're at.
Excellent. Nice one, man. All power to your elbow. I feel that I've got it slightly easy here in sort of more temperate climes and sort of wet England. And, we grow our own vegetables.
Man, you're stuck on an island, bro.
Plenty of wet maritime air coming in.
I mean, it's easy to lock down people in the UK. You're already there. They just stop the boats from leaving, right? It's like Hawaii. I have people escaping Hawaii because I'm like, do you know that only 10% of the food grown on Hawaii is going to Hawaii? 90% is shipped off of there. And the Hawaiians, if the infrastructure for food coming in were to end, they would all starve to death in a few weeks. They don't even know that. Even though there's tropical forest there, it would all be eaten. It would be gone.
Yeah.
And so it's a scary thing choosing where you live. But one of the reasons we're here is there's 14 million elk that migrate through here. There's only 2,000 people. I think we'll have some meat available.
Yeah, that's a very good wild source of sustenance.
Yeah.
Nice one, Diamond. Look, it's been a real pleasure, mate. I'm wary of not to take too much of your precious time. Thank you so much for coming on. And I mean, if you have any closing thoughts, if there's anything you wanted to say or plug, please interrupt me. But it's been a real pleasure chatting with you. We've covered loads of ground, and you did a great job of really shrinking down all of that background information about pole shifts and magnetic inversions. Really well condensed. But thank you just for dipping in there and clarifying for some people. And thanks for a great conversation.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Guys, if you listen to Nigel, I just want to imply or implore you all to continue to share his work. People like him and I do not get in the algorithms. The only way that this information gets out is if our listeners or our viewers take this and share it out on their social medias. So that is what I'm going to implore you all. And I say it to my listeners all the time. Be a hero and share Nigel's work. It's the only, because the powers that be do not want you to hear what we're talking about.
No, they don't. Well, that's jolly kind of you, Darwin. I appreciate that, man. That's jolly good. Nice one. Wicked. Well, have a great day, mate. And thank you all for listening. And do check out the website, lawfulrebel.com. There's stacks more on there. And do join me again for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix.